Hello and welcome to Answering Written Accountancy Questions with me, Michael Norton. I'm going to explain today how to write like an accountant. So, it's the point of this video, really. Students often sort of explain to me that they don't like the written questions and they find them very difficult, really. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through why is it that those questions are found to be difficult, what is the reason why, and then we're going to go through exactly how to answer the questions and be spot on. So in terms of why they're difficult, really, the exam is often looking for a particular accountancy style, and that accountancy style will be to the board or the non-accountants. So we're going to go through that style there. What is it? How we're going to do that? Students often try to write to another accountant, the marker. I'm an accountant. Oh, I'm a trainee accountant. The marker's a professional accountant. I'm going to write like that. I want to get into the accountancy stuff too quickly, rather than writing to a non-accountant. As the question will typically sort of say. The style of writing is all the way up to this point, really, in your studies, in terms of the certificates you will have got and what have you, is going to be about sort of, a GCSE English thing, or A levels, or a degree essay, something like that. Now, this style is going to be the exact opposite of what is actually needed for an accountancy written question. And so we're going to go through and I'll take you through exactly why that is the opposite and how we're going to change this style. Yeah. And then answers often, poor answers often they often lack either recommendations or balance. So make a recommendation, but then again that recommendation often lacks a bit of balance as well. So we're going to go through all of that. Now, if you're recognising those points as being the issues and why you're not liking the written questions, or if you're sort of sitting there thinking, well, I've got this written question here, it's a 20-mark question, and I'm there thinking I've got about 5 marks worth of points. What are they on about? It's way too short. This is going to be the video for you because it's going to explain exactly how those marks are generated across that question and how you're going to start to score really high marks in your answers, really. So if you're not liking the written questions, so don't worry, because by the end of this video, and we're not going to go into detail, about half an hour, this is going to be turned into your key strength in the exam, and you're going to make a lot of marks from it, and you're going to really like it. So why are you going to like it? Well, it's a little bit about me before we start, and why does this make a lot of sense? Well, I'm actually a finance director in real life. I know if you've sort of seen the videos that I produced on the level 2 and level 3 AET course, I did those for a couple of classes because I wanted to recruit a few people from them. But I'm really a finance director in real life. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, and I'm 29 years as a professional accountant, and 26 of those I've been a writing accountant. So I basically, if any of you do the case study, imagine doing a case study every day for 26 years, one after the other. Then that's pretty much my job, really. So I really like the writing sort of part of it and structure it really well. And I was very lucky during my exams, when I was doing my studies, that I had a marker take me through in real detail exactly what was required for the exams and how to score the marks. It was a real strength in my studies, really, and allowed me to score sort of the sort of prize-winning marks in the end, really, and then later on as well in the corporate finance exams. So I'm going to pass that over to you now in this video, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully it'll be helpful. All right, so first of all, mistake number 1, what do people do? And it's about the introduction. Right? Is there an introduction about who we're writing to? So students who struggle often think that they're writing to another accountant. So I'm an accountant, you're an accountant, and we've got to start talking and putting accountancy stuff in there, and they skip over the introduction. All alternative introductions poor, but really the question is going to typically say you're writing to a non-accountant. You're writing to a CEO, you're writing to a board member, something along those lines. So you're going to be writing to that non-accountant, and you're going to be sort of sitting there writing to that non-accountant, and you need to then sort of get a decent introduction before you start. So the non-accountant needs to know, well, why am I reading this paper? What it's about? And that needs to be into the introduction. And to create a good introduction, I want you to imagine that you've taken this person and you've moved them into a room and you've sat them down at a table and you put a piece of paper in front of them, and without saying a word to them, you've walked out. They don't have no idea why they're sitting in this room. They know no idea why they're at the table, and they have no idea definitely why they're reading this piece of paper. So your short introduction needs to be along the lines of, well, what is this paper about? This paper's about this. It's going to consider this and that. It might make a decision at the end of it. And if you really wanted to sort of show off a bit, you might have to frame the discussion. These are the objectives of our company that you're going to consider and keep as your frame of reference through the question. So if you imagine now that this person's been sat down and they've got this piece of paper in front of them, if they read that introduction and said, all right, okay, paper's going to be about this, it's going to consider this and that, and also this is how I'm going to think whilst I'm reading it, then pretty much I now know why I'm here. Clearly, they put me in this room to read this piece of paper and then make a decision on the basis of what's been said, or agree with a decision on the basis of what's been said. So that's the first bit into your introduction, really. Sometimes we then, but Michael, the question says that the CEO has asked you to tell me about this. Yes, but the CEO might be wanting to hand this over to somebody else as well, who hasn't asked you about it, and is again in the same point. They don't know why on earth I'm sitting here reading your piece of paper. So if you have it from that point of view, why am I reading your piece of paper and what am I supposed to do with it? Then that will help with the introduction. Don't leave the introduction marks on the table, and make sure that not too long, so you don't want to be going on and wasting all your time for what is 1 or 2 marks, but you do need to have it, and you do need to sort of have it from that point of view of a quick, this is what it's about, this is what it's going to consider, this is what you're going to do with it at the end of it. Okay, so that's the first bit, and then easy one, that one, really. Now the second bit now is a bit trickier, but we'll explain why. So the accountancy style of writing is very different to an English GCSE or a degree essay. So everything that you've been doing so far, probably up to this point to earn certificates, has been about this sort of method of writing that is, this sort of much longer sort of style. Accountancy is the exact opposite. So we're going to go through and we can construct an accountancy style of writing. So students often write in paragraphs. This is a degree essay one. This would be a paragraph of 8 to 16 lines, really. 8 would be very short, actually, more like 12 to 16 lines worth of paragraphs. So you shouldn't really be doing that. You should be writing in paragraphs of 4 to 5 lines, 2 sentences of the paragraph, space of a line, and then another paragraph of 4 to 5 lines. The reason why you do that is because there'll be 3 things. Firstly, a paragraph of more than 4 lines is hard to read and difficult to mark in accountancy, so it generates less marks. So I want you to imagine that you've written a paragraph of 8 lines, 9 lines in there, and I've written 2 paragraphs of 4 lines separated out nicely. Each of them have got 2 marks worth of answers in them. I've got 2 paragraphs, tick, tick, mark, mark. I've got my 2 marks. You've got 1 of 8. I've got to read this together and connect it all up. And you might get 1, you might get 1.5, you probably can get 2, and I as the marker probably marked you down because you were irritating me. So your paragraphs are much more clipped, easier to read if they're shorter paragraphs. If you go for the longer style as well, the longer paragraph style, you've got a much higher likelihood you're going to start waffling. This thing goes on and on and on and on, and you're waffling, you're winging it backwards and forwards. It's not got as good a flow as with the shorter method, and we'll see when we get into ABC marks how the shorter methods are more important, because you can get this sort of much better punchier style. It's going to waffle more, waste time more, and also as well you've got to put a lot of connecting words into it to keep it all actually to be English. Okay, so you're going to put in more words, it's going to waffle more, and it's going to score less. Uses up more time, scores less. Don't do it like that. Your paragraph should be 2 sentences and of 4 to 5 lines at most. So that's, and keep them nice and punchy. It will create a nice punchy style of answer. Now let's go into education style versus accountancy style as well. So in the accountancy style, we put our key points first. So we have sections for key points. If you're going to prioritize them, I'm going to show off and be a prize winner. Key points first, section, other points second section. Education style tends to put the key points last. It's like a big reveal. It's a thriller. Keep reading, and at the end you'll find out who's the murderer. It's not, it's sort of like trying to create a page turner till you get to the last paragraph. So you've got to keep reading this thing to the last paragraph. Most often people actually read the executive summary and they've sort of switched off by 2 or 3 pages in, really. So the key points need to be first in accountancy style, and that's like it's prioritization. We've got a short paragraphs, 4 to 5 lines. Bullet points and section titles. So actually section titles. An essay doesn't allow section titles, and this breaks it up. It should be your titles to your various sort of sections. It makes it easy for me to mark. So if you put like current ratio as a section title and then do your things underneath, the tick's going by your current ratio, the mark's going next to it. It's easy to mark. Can't do that with an essay style. Yeah. And then we need this closed conversation thing here. We're going to explain that in detail, but in the education style, it's very open. So, what is this closed conversation that we're talking about here? So, we're after a closed conversation in terms of the education style, sort of trying to promote a sort of peer-to-peer discussion. Everybody's sort of finding their way. There's bits of it that are missing. You're going to do your own research, or you're going to think for yourself. So you have a think, and because you've thought about it, you're more invested in it, and in your thinking, you learn stuff, and it was more interesting. Great. Okay. But accountancy necessarily isn't about you learning. It's about, in terms of as the reader of the thing, it's not about you learning. It's about you making a decision. This is the issue. This is the background to it. This is the way we think we're going to solve it. Do you agree? Yes or no? It's not about you sort of suddenly at the end of this thing as the CEO having some kind of great knowledge about the theory behind the current asset, the current ratio. It's not what the point of it is. It might be nice that you learned that at the end of it, but you probably forgot about it by the time you walked out. So accountancy sounds about decision making, and it's a very closed sort of thing. This is the issue. This is the upside and the downside. This is how we can solve it. Do you agree? Yes or no? This is what I'm going to recommend on balance. Very closed. And it might also as well be, well, oh yeah, by the way, all these other things you could have think about, you could have had a bit of a think about in the educational style where further reading or whatever. No, already thought about those for you as well. On balance, I discounted them, or they're just acceptable risks. Yeah, so it's sort of very closed down, very sort of, this is what the answer is here. And there's marks all the way along for creating that kind of closed down style. The open style misses all of those marks. Culturally as well, the closed style is more professional. It is more professional, but it's also quite abrupt. So in terms of just a cultural sort of situation, really, some people can find it a little bit uncomfortable to be going dum dum dum. This is what the situation is. This is the upside. This is the downside. This is on balance what it is. We're going to do this. So that's where we are from that point of view. So that's all very interesting, Michael. How do I create this closed style? Because we know we want it now, you're sort of feeling the desire for it, but how do we create it? So let's create the closed style. There are three marks in any written accountancy question, 3 types of marks. There are A marks, and A marks are statements of the obvious. There are calculations, something like that. Statement of the obvious, or calculation, whatever it want to be. It's not. It's sort of straightforward. It is what it is. A B mark is an explanation or a theory behind it. This is what it is. This is why it's here on the paper. So we'll get into an example in a minute. And a C mark is professional extension. Because of the calculation and because of the theory behind it, we should do this or we should do that. Doesn't necessarily run an ABC order. It doesn't go ABC, 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 and it definitely doesn't go all the A's, then all the B's, then all the C's. And they can be a different one, but they'll be, you'll clear off each point of them. So let's do an example of this. So we're going to have this one little section title above current ratio. CEO has asked us to consider the current ratio of our company. So B mark up front, the theory side of it. Current ratio represents, current assets divided by current liabilities, and it reflects on the one hand how we can pay our debts, our short-term debts as they fall due, and on the other hand, the money is tied up in our short-term asset holding. Okay, fine. Okay, so we've got a bit of theory going on. B mark is quite nice there. Now well, that's all nice. Well, what happens then? Well, if the current ratio is too low, there's a threat we're going to be bankrupt. Even if we might be really profitable, if we can't pay our creditors or whatever, or our staff, well, we're going to run out of money. And so it doesn't really help, does it? If it's too high though, why is it too high? Is it because the stock's too high and we're not selling it? So we got a load of stock in our thing that's not selling, or we've got a large cash holding. But either way, those have got to be funded by debt that we're going to pay interest on, or equity that we're going to pay dividends on. So we're going to have to pay to hold that, a high current asset ratio. So one's a risk and one's a cost. Okay. Now whacked in the A mark, there's the current ratio. Now, okay, in this thing, I've put current ratio is equal to assets over liabilities, and then I put the amounts in there, and I've got equals 1.3. Now I want to push this a bit further then. So what does it mean? What we're going to do? Well, this is a trap sometimes. There's a bit of balance into this thing. Quite often, students go on the current ratio, let's say, oh, higher the ratio, the better. You know, nice and safe, and it's brilliant, isn't it? Let's have a ratio of 1.3, or let's increase it to 1.8 or 2 or whatever. But the question might have said, are you Sainsbury's, which for anybody around the world is a big supermarket? Well, we don't have any debtors. Our customers pay at the till, and we pay our suppliers, all of our sort of farmers and whatever, a month after we get their supplies. So if we look at it and think about it, you know, we sell our stock pretty quickly because it's gone off if it's there for too long. So if we were holding, you know, this 1.3 here, we've got a load of creditors that we'll be paying in the future. We've got a lot of cash. We've got, you know, probably a bit of stock, but not much of it. Well, why would we want to hold a 1.3 ratio? Why don't we take the cash that we got and we give it back to our shareholders? We don't have to pay them dividends in future, or we give it and we pay off some debt. So we could say, well, actually, yeah, whilst it means that we got greater security, we could repay back some debt, or repay some debt, or buy back some shares and reduce our costs. And on balance, we should do that. So what you can see here is you know, from what would look like a 1 mark current ratio, you know, what is the current ratio, and discuss it, to, you know, a lot of marks that are suddenly appeared up. I've got some theory behind here. I've got some extension about what we're going to do in terms of our objectives. I've got the actual calculation itself, and then I've got, you know, some further professional discussion, and on balance, and I've come up with a recommendation, you know, a recommendation on balance that we should do. So that's how to create depth in your answers, really. I think, well, Michael, you know, you've done this for 29 years. That's all very interesting, but the C marks look hard. So the easy way to work out with your C marks is, so what? You've made a statement, so what? You know, and if there's still a so what left, then you haven't answered the C marks. So we got our current ratio 1.3. Well, so what? Well, the current ratio represents this. Well, so what? Well, if it's too low or if it's too high, it's this. Well, so what? Well, okay, it's 1.3, so I think we should do this. All right. Is there anything else that we could say about this? No, not really. Right, we've answered the question. Okay, so if you're always there going, so what? And if you keep sort of saying so what enough to you, then you know, you'll eventually answer the question, and that's how you rack up the C marks. And then in our closed style, we're going to point to a sort of our balance. Now, decisions have two sides, and the questions that you have are two sides. You know, life's like a pancake. There's two sides to everything. So in reality, decisions are often like sort of 70-30 at best. At best, you know, at best you're going to get like a really, you know, 70% possibility of upside, 30% possibility of downside. That's brilliant. I'll make 10 of those decisions, and we'll end of the day four decisions up. In reality, it's a good day if they're 60-40, and quite often they're 50-50 in the choice of the lesser of two evils, really. So that's where it is. So students who jump for just one side of the argument, just say, boom, that's it, and they don't give the upsides and downsides, there's two issues going on here. On the one hand, they're missing marks. On the other hand, to the examiner, they're setting out what's known as advocacy risk. So when you were doing your ethics, you'd have this advocacy risk that you know, the professional accountant might advocate too strong a position. And it's an area which is not really well understood within accountancy, but it's a really important, probably the most important set of risks, really, which is if I, as an accountant, advocate too aggressive a position and I don't give the upsides and downsides, then what happens is that might not be the right decision. And I might find out that's not the right decision, but I'm a bit forced to continue down this route of a very bad decision because I need to now protect my professional integrity. So if I said, we've got to do this, and we're really forceful about it, and then a week later I thought, oh, we shouldn't really have done that, should we? We shouldn't really be doing this, should we? But well, I can't tell anybody now because we're so forceful at it. We have to keep doing it. And so we keep going down and keep going down and keep going down. And I keep building on this mistake and digging the hole further. And, you know, if there's like a fraud or something, quite with an accountant, quite often that they've, you know, on the one hand, they find a weakness in the system and they've just a moment of weakness, or alternatively, they've advocated too strong a position and then suddenly they end up, you know, having to sort of keep following on and what's known as doubling down almost. So we've got this thing and we're trying to sort of get balance into our questions because we're trying to demonstrate that we're a balanced accountant. I'm not going to advocate something silly, you know, be silly on that one, and therefore pass me because I'm balanced. So there's an upside, recommendation works out. There's a downside, it doesn't. You know, we're going to do this, the upside's this, the downside's that, on balance, and we should either do it, we shouldn't do it. You know, this is the risk we're going to accept, this is the risk we're going to offset, this is the risk we're going to avoid. So mistake number 3, really, students forget balance, and the examiner wants to remove people who don't have balance because they're too one-sided and they're risks to the profession. That's it. So that's our balance side. So last thing then, note breadth. I've created our depth for you, but obviously if we've got a 20-mark question and we've got 5 different ratios they're wanting us to do, let's say we've got to cover 5 ratios. You're going to get the easy marks first, you know, and then the C marks are going to be, you know, the hardest ones to get, and you'll get those last. So you're going to always cover all the points. Don't like do one bit, you know, for 3/4 of the time allocated and do the other 4 bits in the other quarter. If we're in an audit question, let's say, it would be breadth of different audit tests that we're going to demonstrate, you know, in terms of the way in which we're going to go about it. Don't do, you know, 20 physical asset tests. So that's how we create marks. So there's only so many marks for each part of the question answer, you know, the answer to the question. There's only so marks. So you're going to need to cover all, you need to get your breadth, and hopefully then you got your depth as well with your ABC marks. So, well, that's all right, Michael. I'm going to now just start writing, are you? And that's not what you're going to do. So you're going to plan the question and you're going to manage your time. So this is how do you achieve that? Well, we've got the basic building blocks and what we're trying to achieve now. And so what we're going to do before we start writing is we create a grid. We don't have a series of jumbled notes as we're going through the question that you can't then read because they're you know, you're a bit nervous. We create a grid, and this protects the breadth. We don't forget anything. We get it all in there. We don't forget anything that we've been answering. It also protects the depth because we can create depth using this grid. So this is a planning grid here. I just put in one little bit for that current ratio bit. Upside, downside, A mark, B mark, C marks, you know, key marks, let's say, and you know, other marks, an introduction. We have a conclusion down here, something like that. And then going through, I'm putting my words into my grid. You know, and I'm sort of going through as I'm reading the question, I'm putting my words about I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And at the end of reading through my question, I've now, you know, on my planning sort of side, I've you know, my 20 marks question, which is going to be 20 minutes. I'm going to use 4 minutes probably for my planning grid in there. And now I'm just going to write. And I might find some more C marks as I'm thinking, as I'm going along, but I've pretty much done 4 minutes of thinking, you know, 16 minutes of writing, and, you know, going into autopilot mode really. So if you do that in terms of the planning grid, with the upside, the downside, the A mark, the B mark, the C marks, and your words as you're planning before you touch the page, it will have much more structure to the way in which you write, and you will actually be way faster. That 4 minutes invested in your plan, and an effective plan. You're always told to plan for your written questions, but is that just writing a load of scrabbly notes down that doesn't really make anything? Well, this is a plan. This is how you do it in your planning grid. Now, in terms of showing off and time management, you could have key points, non-key points as your sections. That would be nice if you can do it. If you want to avoid repeating the same points in the conclusion, because quite often you can get to the conclusion, especially in like case studies, and you can be there thinking, oh, do I write down everything that I put in the middle in there? You know, no, actually, use a SWOT analysis and that kind of stuff to summarize it all up. And really, that's it. So in summary, hopefully this was helpful. The biggest thing that students don't like about written questions, I think, is that they don't see where the marks come from. You know, it's a 20-mark question, there's 5 points to raise, well, that's 5 marks. What do I write about beyond that, really? What is this examiner on about? I'm missing something. So hopefully we've seen through this that actually, well, there's a bit of an introduction, which is why would the person who's reading this thing, why are they actually reading it, really? And it's not the marker just because they want to see whether you can do a few equations. You know, it's usually, you know, it'll be set out in the question. Then you've got the A marks for the calculations, but then you've got the B marks for explanations and theory, and you've got C marks for the professional extension. What we're going to do with this? Why should we do it? What's the upsides? What's the downsides? What's the recommendation on this? So we've got these recommendations. We've got that. We've got upsides, downsides. We've got balance as well. So we've got balance, and we've got this, do we accept these risks? Okay, so we've got that, and then we've got our summary. You know, now, in that example, I was given a 1 mark sort of 1.3 current asset, the current ratio, and I've turned it into 10 marks. You know, and all right, that was too long. It went on a bit if we had 5 ratios for in a 20-mark question, but that's what we were up to. So hopefully that's the end. That's the end of where we're up to. As ever, good luck with your exams. Hopefully this has helped, and see you next time. Bye bye.